Thank you. We got a great reading.
We've got a whole audience out here too.
So welcome. Thank you all for having me all day in Marion County. So I had to actually come through hurricanes and everything else. But I can tell you, we've had a great time today. We started off over at the church, and we did a 2-hour session that was basically dealing with the big issues. I would say some of the big issues in the state of Florida. And I was actually able to articulate a little bit of a difference between myself and our current United States Senator, Rick Scott. So just to give you a little bit of a start, I'm actually from Florida and he's not. I was born and raised in Liberty City, and last night somebody said, you know, the introduction, they said he was born in the hood. And I was like, wait a minute. I was 4 blocks away from the project. I was hood adjacent. I was not born and raised in the hood. But I actually, I love where I was born. I love where I was raised. And I actually remember when my father, I'm holding on to my mom's leg at about 4.5 years old, and my 2 older brothers were running around. And my father took that union job, and he moved us out of an apartment. She had 1 on her hip, me on her thigh, and 2 others. And we moved into a house with grass all the way around the yard in Miami. So I know that poor people don't pay taxes because they don't have money. And rich people don't pay taxes because they have money. They have lawyers and they have accountants. So the country building it and raising it from the middle class is actually what we have to do. So for me, I got the AFL-CIO endorsement. In the state of Florida, the largest union in the country and the largest union in the state. So I left and was bused to Miami Beach. I went to high school there, but they tell you I have 4 brothers. Going to high school in Miami Beach, junior high school and high school, I then took that 2.6 grade point average and I went to Florida A&M University. So yes, I am a rattler for all you Gators in the area. But I can tell you, I went to Florida A&M. I took that 2.6 grade point average, and I wound up having 14 patents in artificial intelligence. And I never took a math class outside of Florida A&M. So our education is critical and it's important. And I can tell you, I studied because I knew I did not want to go back to Miami to grab that mop that I had left and actually do that kind of job again. When I left Florida A&M University, I got a job as a geophysicist with Amico Production, not to find oil, but to find better ways of finding oil. But that then gave me the impetus to decide that I wanted to be an astronaut. Growing up in Florida, and I took a little test for the Navy, and I kind of did okay on that test. And I wound up getting into the United States Navy as a pilot. And what did they do? They sent me right back to Florida, Pensacola, Florida, birthplace of the naval aviation. And I actually went there and got my wings, and I flew in the Navy for 7.5 years. So what does that make the importance for Florida? Today we have the largest, one of the top largest militaries in the country. We have almost more people in our active duty military in the state of Florida than the country of Canada. We have 1.5 million veterans who live here. They get their health care here. We have the best health care system in the country. But it makes no sense if you can't get in for 60 to 90 days. And so we've got to be able to right-size the Department of Veterans Affairs. Because if we don't, the 22 the 25 people who kill themselves every day who are military veterans will continue. And that's been the case for years. Now, we just came through a storm to get here. We got a hurricane hit us today. 2 weeks ago, we had a hurricane to hit Texas. And we got 3 to 4 more just this hurricane season. We have a tax that's called an environmental tax. Because in the state of Florida, we actually have the highest insurance rates in the country. Highest. Now, in Texas, they have the same thing because they just got hit by a hurricane a few weeks ago. We got Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. All of us have a shared responsibility because we could all get hit by the same hurricane. No matter what happens in Tallahassee, Republican or Democrat, they can't do a thing because everything they've tried, from giving companies, insurance companies, funds that they either go bankrupt or they just leave town, or whatever else, we cannot fix this as a single state issue. We have that shared responsibility, so we have to then share in the risk. I personally worked in the intelligence world under a thing called the Critical Infrastructure Protection Program. That is 14 elements in this nation where those 14 elements are basically managed and run by the federal government. So if the lights went out on a large basis, the federal government would come in and cover that. If intelligence, that's the way I work, and that's how my familiarity came with the Critical Infrastructure Protection Program. We had fires in California. We had a flood in Iowa now. And only 35 people had flood insurance. That's how rare floods in Iowa are. That means we have this shared responsibility, and that is the only way we're going to be able to drop our insurance rates. So I've offered to put insurance as the 15th element in the National Critical Infrastructure Protection Program. What that would mean is that the monies that they allocated for your $10,000 rebate, and then they ran out of the $10,000, that money would have gone to the federal government, or would go to the federal government, and California would put theirs in, and Texas would put theirs in, and the federal government would then be the first payer. The leveling of that would mean that across the enterprise, we would get a leveling across the housing and property infrastructure, and that would then drop our prices about 30%. It would drop California's prices about 30% because they have fires and others. It would drop Texas about 28%, Mississippi about 22%, Alabama about 24%, and so on and so on. That leveling is critically important because when the federal government becomes the first payer, then we in the state of Florida would get about 30% drop in our insurance rates. So now let's talk a little bit about the third richest state in the country. Third richest state. If we were a country, we would be about 28th in our economy. The third richest state in the country pays its teachers 50th out of 50. 50th out of 50. The AFL-CIO union did not endorse me by happenstance. They endorsed me because I understand how that works. 50th out of 50 states. So the importance for education, a full education, not one watered down that won't teach our full history. Remember, I was bused to Miami Beach. And when I got off the bus from the 8th grade until I graduated, every day I heard, if you do not remember your history, you are doomed to repeat it. And now I live in a state that will not teach the full throat of Black history because it may be uncomfortable to somebody. those become the kinds of things that are just not taking our country in the right direction. And when we do that, we actually hurt ourselves and we hurt all of us. Now, we are on a ballot, and I got to tell you how I'm going to win. The first thing is a woman's right to choose is on the ballot. And that is very differentiating. But for me, it's very personal. My wife had an abortion, an emergency abortion. She had twins. Now, she carried twins in our youngest child. One of the twins was atopic. If she had had that today in the state of Florida, where it takes you 5 weeks, I don't know who in the world thinks a woman could know that she's even pregnant in 5 weeks. But if she had had that here, she may not be here today. I would not have a younger son who can run the company while I'm doing this thing here. Because we had maybe minutes to make that decision. I can tell you the doctor told me I had no choice but to sign the paper because my wife would be dead if she couldn't get back in the room with that approval. These things are real to me. And for a governor who turned down Medicare expansion, Medicaid expansion, and put 750,000 people off of insurance, and then to be replaced by a governor who then put another 350,000 people, these are people, off of insurance. We are going in the wrong direction. Because whomever the next governor is, that governor will take and he will have 1.1 to 1.2 million people showing up at the emergency room for their first appointment. That makes no sense. Because as transactional as they want to make it, it's much more expensive to get your health care at the emergency room than to get it at the doctor's office, or even better than that, go to the doctor to get a normal health care checkup and then do preventative health care yourself. In our systems, and I have a health care system, I have the largest health care network in the country because I tied to the two largest networks. And I have my own. So because I stop fraud, they have to tie to me. So that makes me the largest. I have 308 million Americans in that system. There's nobody that understands healthcare to the level of Rick Scott in this race but me. And I can tell you, he will not stand on the stage and debate on healthcare, because he knows that I understand the differentiation between pay for performance and fee for service, where he made his fraud money. And so those become the differentiating things that experience matters. I'm running in this race against about 4 other candidates. None of them have that experience. I do. I've worked in defense and intelligence space, and I flew an airplane that was the single most strategic aircraft in all of the military. We talked to everybody, but our real goal and objective was to talk to the submarines. I have experience. I've written a large part of the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. I worked across the aisle with Senator and Dr. Cassidy from Louisiana. That was important because it helped us drop the death rate for opioid addiction. We also worked on the Veterans Bill, where we were going after veterans for homelessness. I know I gotta go. I can't go through my whole resume, but I thank you all in Marion County because you are going to be the difference in so many of us winning and so many of us winning. Because we're not going to lose. We're not going to lose. There's no way Rick Scott is going to beat us, period. Because Florida's not for sale. I am going to beat Rick Scott like he stole something because he did steal something. So thank you, Marion County. Oh, by the way, you gotta go to StanleyForFlorida.com. StanleyForFlorida.com. I'm gonna go around there to that golf course. Y'all got 35 golf courses. I didn't even talk about it. Thank you all.
Meet Stanley Campbell, a leader for Florida's future.
A Navy veteran, entrepreneur, and advocate for working families.
Now he's stepping up to fight for us in the U.S. Senate.
I understand our challenges in Florida because I've lived them. From my early days in Liberty City to building successful businesses across the state, from Pensacola to Key West. Together, we can make a real difference.
Stanley Campbell, the People's Choice for U.S. Senate. Vote August 20th.